Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. My dear sister and fierce advocate, we have Reecie Colbert, who is the host, Sirius XM, the Reecie Colbert Show. Remarkable program. You all got to check it out, all right? And my colleague at Sirius XM. Good day, sister. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Richey. Good to be with you.
Good to have you back on the show. Listen, I agreed with you. These folks, they rabbit-ass minded. They thought they were going to jump over, ignore, push aside the vice president of the United States on the Democratic nomination ticket. But some people thought they were going to do that. You were part of the historic and well-coordinated conference call, I will call it, with the VP and raising a whole bunch of money in quick fashion. Tell us about that call, and we're going to get into strategy moving forward.
Well, Win with Black Women actually came about 4 years ago around the advocacy of getting a Black woman on the ticket. There's no secret that I was always for Vice President Kamala Harris being on the ticket. And so this is an organization that has for the past 4 years been doing advocacy around getting Black women elected and raising money across the country for the past 4 years. And so it was well suited to take on the challenge to almost spontaneously within a matter of hours galvanize so many Black women around, making sure that Vice President Kamala Harris locked down the nomination. We heard plenty of reporting, and I know that you covered it, Dr. Richey, about how there were plans from donors to try to skip over her. And we said, hell no, we won't go. And they saw our show of force, and they knew they needed to fall right in line and get information.
The reality is Democrats have to win by two dynamics, energy and unity. They have to build coalitions, and they must have the energy that permeates to the younger class so that that noise, that vigor is part of the campaign. The reality is this: Biden did not have the it factor as it relates to energy. There's a possibility the party would have united under him after the nomination process, but energy has to be organic. Energy has to be injected into the process. Now, VP Harris being presidential contender Harris, that energy has been injected for sure. Talk to us about the energy that you feel with Black women in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, this has totally reinvigorated the race. I'm on the airwaves multiple times a week. I have my own show. And I was trying to shake people out of their slumber, out of their stupor, out of their being disillusioned and disengaged. And now it seems like everybody has woke up to the fact that we have a dire threat to the future of our country in Trump and Vance. And so what we've seen now is we've seen people kind of come to terms with the fact that this is happening, and all of the fear that people have of they not gonna let her become the nominee, they not gonna let a Black woman do this, has turned to resolve and making sure that we make history this November, because Vice President Kamala Harris, make no mistake about it, is the most qualified presidential candidate, period. She has clinched the presumably, at least on paper, without the virtual roll call, the delegates by a mile, that she needs to be the nominee. So it's time to make it happen. It's time for people to stop operating out of a sense of fear and start operating out of a sense of the fact that we have the power, we have the people power over the donors, over the racists on the other side, and we have the energy working in our favor.
And let me say this to your point, because Republicans figured something out that I think Democrats are still trying to figure out. They abandoned the electability argument a long time ago. Mm-hmm. They stopped saying who is electable and who is not. And the reason is because electability is in the parameters of the mind. And so as long as you're voting for the person, they are always electable no matter what. So they found the most disagreeable white male they could find in politics. He would have been considered the most unelectable. That's what Jeb Bush and everybody else said about him during the first Republican primary when 20 damn Republicans were on the stage. But guess what? He emerged because the people who supported him did not buy the electability argument. So those on the left, they have to also take a page out of that playbook and understand electability is in your mind. So if you believe in your person, you vote for that person, and democracy is on the ballot. Reecie, you got to talk about the reality of what's on the ballot. And I tell my college students, I say this often on air, democracy itself is actually on the ballot. Talk to us about that.
Well, the funny thing about the argument about democracy is you have a large number of people, data has shown, that don't believe democracy is working as it is. And so what I like to say is that citizenship is on the ballot. Our ability to operate as autonomous human beings, to go travel from state to state and not be, for instance, surveilled if you are a woman who needs to have an abortion procedure by your ex-boyfriend who claims that you're pregnant or that you had an abortion, like what's happening down in Texas. To be able to walk down the street in a state like Georgia and not have the cops accuse you of being an illegal immigrant and haul you off to jail with impunity because you don't have your papers while you're walking around. And so the very essence of our citizenship is truly on the ballot, and people need to stop thinking about, that, this is immigration, for instance, is just an issue that relates to Latinos and illegal immigrants. It relates, and I don't even like to use the word illegal, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say that we have to understand that as women, we are not federal citizens of this country anymore because our autonomy depends on where we live. And that's going to be the case for all of us if Project 2025 is implemented.
You make a hell of a point about citizenship versus democracy, because I think there's actually common ground between conservatives and Democrats to say, this form of democracy may not work for us. And there's some commonality there. Even libertarians make some really good points politically about how this democracy works. But citizenship, you make a fine point about citizenship, because the reality is that the policy of the right aims to take away dynamics of your citizenship. For example, interstate travel is a constitutional right. You have a constitutional right to interstate travel. And when a state will say, okay, you can't leave this state to do something that's legal in another state, we're going to charge you in this state with attempted murder or murder coordination, conspiracy for murder, et cetera. That's insane, because I remember when it was illegal to gamble in Georgia. So people would drive to Biloxi, or they would drive to Florida in order to gamble and come back to the state of Georgia. Nobody was waiting to arrest people in Georgia for gambling in a state where it was legal to do so. But they only started to apply these ridiculous laws as it relates to women.
Yes. But can I also add, though, that it's not even just women. I mean, in Texas, they wanted to be able to basically snitch on people who gave Uber rides to people going to abortion clinics. It's about privacy. Part of your citizenship is the right to privacy. And so if you're corresponding with a woman who's talking about her pregnancy, then your records could be surveilled. And so I know a lot of times people don't think of reproductive rights as an issue that impacts men, but contraception is an issue that impacts you. Your privacy is an issue that impacts you. The ability to travel and to make a living doing Uber or Lyft is an issue that impacts you. So this really is dire when we're talking about our citizenship and the rights that we are currently enjoying, that the right has already begun stripping away. Be clear, this is not a Project 2025 future hypothetical. This is happening as we speak and has been happening for the past several years.
That's right. I sit on the board of directors for a major hospital in Atlanta, so I'm always researching these nuances between healthcare policy or legislation and then the effect from medical practitioners. And what you find is that in states where these extreme laws have been passed, medical doctors are afraid to do what is right to do what is proper to do, even if it means saving the mother's life. They are afraid to do these procedures because they believe they will be prosecuted by the law. Talk to us about that.
Well, that's the reality. I mean, the cruelty behind this, where you have to have the woman who's in sepsis, who is infected, who is fighting for her life, has a fever. I remember when I was giving birth to my baby, I struck a fever, and so they had to do an emergency C-section. Thank God I had a healthy baby and I had a healthy delivery. But these are the kinds of things that they want to traumatize women in the already most vulnerable position that they can possibly be in, and traumatize their families as well. We have a disproportionately higher maternal mortality rate in this country compared to any other developed nation. They don't want to do anything to address that. They don't want to do anything to address the infant mortality, which has gone up in states with abortion bans. That is what we are facing with the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party in November.
Well articulated. Now let's talk about strategy moving forward. Obviously, Republicans have introduced the worst policies. The vast majority of Americans disagree with their policies line by line. The vast majority of Americans agree with left-leaning policies line by line. But for some reason, damn it, the DNC has not been able to make the case. The messaging has been horrible with the DNC for years. So how does VP Harris, now presidential contender, How does she make the case about what's really at stake here and how the vast majority of Americans, line by line, actually agree with left-leaning politics over conservative?
Well, the first thing that she has to do is she has to speak truth, which she's always known to do. The fact of the matter is that people are paying more for bread and butter, for groceries, for chips, for McDonald's, hell, even for utilities and all a number of things. And so what Vice President Kamala Harris has to articulate is an economic agenda that's going to solve and resolve these issues. We started to see that with President Biden talking about capping corporate rent profit prices, which is driving up rents across the country. And so we need to see Vice President Kamala Harris and her campaign articulate the economic vision for this country. They gave out stimulus checks. They had cut child poverty in half with the child tax credit. They have reduced the cost of healthcare with many of the initiatives around Obamacare and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so those are the messages that they have to convey, is that we do not want to turn back the clock and go back to the regressive policies of Trump, who, by the way, was voted out because our economy was in the toilet when he left.
That's right. Now, here's the thing that has to happen. Just like Biden had different policies than President Obama, President Biden had a different policy with Netanyahu in Israel than President Obama did. There are some domestic dynamics that they actually disagreed on, all right? President Obama went one way, Biden believed another. Biden comes in, he does his thing. He's somewhat independent of President Obama's policies in multiple variations. Now you have VP Harris. I've interviewed VP Harris on a few occasions. And I noticed that typically if there's something that basically Biden is for, she will say, as the president has said. She will start her answer in that way. Do you think this is the time to articulate her differences, especially as it relates to things like Netanyahu, which I know she has a different point of view than Biden does? Do you think it's time for her to start to, accent those nuances of difference in her campaign?
Well, for one, I think she has a strong record to run on under the Biden-Harris administration, but people want to know what she has going forward. And so absolutely, in areas where she's certainly more progressive on in terms of rent relief, in terms of economic relief, which she had the LIFT Act when she was running for president, she had the Rent Relief Act. She's certainly more progressive in terms of being more aggressive about reproductive rights than President Biden was. She absolutely should. And obviously, Israel-Gaza is an issue that is very concerning to a lot of voters. And so to the extent that she can articulate that without undermining our national security, I think she can. She absolutely should. She has a lot to offer beyond just being Biden's right-hand woman. And I think the country will definitely find out more about her particular vision in the future weeks to come.
All right, there it is. So understand this. If you don't like where the country is at, just remember 100% men have been in charge of it. So now you get an opportunity. This is a refresher and a reset. I'm thankful. I am for the divine feminine spirit that's happening upon this planet. Dear sister, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Tell people how they can follow you and check out your work.
ReecieColbert.com. And I have a very fun card game called Am I Trippin' and Sounds About Right game on amitrippinggame.com. Check it out.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We will check it out. Thank you, sis, for all you do.
Thank you.